It's kind of interesting when you get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The crowd kind of slowly begins to kind of thin out a little bit. So I'm glad you're here. Pastor Carolyn covered steps 1, 2, and 3 last week. What I want to look at tonight is 4, 5, 6, and 7. And as I look back, it's kind of interesting. I ended up taking steps 1, 2, and 3, not knowing anything about the steps. And the question is, how can that be? Well, when I was in college, I gave my life to Christ. And in the church, they call that the altar call. And so really the first 3 steps are really the altar call for folks within the church community. Bill Wilson kind of created in AA kind of a non-sectarian group so that anybody could be a part of it. And so the first 3 steps for them are, I can't, God can, I think I'll let him. But it's interesting, after taking the first 3 steps, I still carried with me all the strain and the stress and the worry and the resentments and the anger and the obsessing before I took steps 1, 2, and 3. Anybody there? Yeah. The question is, how can that be? And it turned out for me, and I think for all of us, that step 3 invites us to trust God with our life. But I discovered I thought I was trusting Him. I said I was trusting Him. But I was living as though everything depended upon me. And man, I'll tell you, that is a stressful way to live. A few years later, I received a call into the ministry, became a pastor, but I still live with all the stress and the strain and the resentments and the anger and the obsessing that I had before I had gotten the call. And for the same reason, I was living as though everything depended upon me. It was 25 years into my life, when I was about 50, that all of a sudden all the stress and the strain and the worry, all of that kind of caught up with me. And while this is a crash course on the 12 steps, I had the crash before the steps. And it was ugly. You could call it a nervous breakdown. It was basically but the bottom line was, at the very end of that, I did not care whether I lived or died. Hit my knees, having lost my way, and I became desperate for a solution. And it's interesting, God has a way of answering those prayers. And He brought a couple of men into my life, one named Bob Sloan, who became a mentor for me for about 10 years. And then later on, a man named Palmer Graves, who became my sponsor. And it's interesting, as I began the program, I said to Bob, why is it that everybody I know needs to know the stuff that I'm learning, and they don't seem to be? And he said, I always remember what he said. He said they need to. They have just simply not experienced enough pain. And I thought, wow, turns out pain is the great teacher for you and me. Pain will get you into step work, but you don't have to wait for the pain to take the steps. You with me? Pain will get you into step work, but you don't have to wait for the pain to get there. You can make a conscious choice to simply do the steps and benefit from them. Yeah. It all depends on how much pain you want to experience, because sooner or later all the stress and the strain and the worry and the obsessing and the resentments and the anger, it will all sooner or later catch up with you, because it always catches up with us. What I discovered after having taken the first 3 steps is 3 steps is not enough. It's kind of like Lay's potato chips. Ever tried to eat 3 of those? Nah, not enough of that either. And the question is, why is that? What I began to realize as I looked back is that when I took the first 3 steps, I brought a lot of the world with me. This crazy, dysfunctional, defective, fallen world. Now, how do I know? Well, all the stress and the strain and the worry and the anger and the resentments and the obsessing, that's all evidence of me trying to live my life under my own power, in my own will. And it's interesting, as I look back, See the first three steps, they may change our eternal destination, but they don't do anything for our present situation. Let me say that again. The first three steps, they can change our eternal destination, but they don't do anything for our present situation. First three steps get me to where God can move and work in my life. But it takes the rest of the steps to give God the opportunity to do what He wants to do and what I desperately need to have done. So 3 steps are not enough. So let's take a look at 4. And I love that these are numbered because even I can figure out what comes next. Read step 4 with me. We got it up there. I got it right up here. Okay, good. Step 4, let's read it together. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. One day, Bob, my mentor, he drew a circle. He drew a circle on a piece of paper. I got a graphic with this. We'll see what happens. Oh, is it up there? Oh, it's not back here. Oh, tricky. Oh, anyway, okay, thank you. Oh, the graphics don't show up. Trick. That was the trick one. Okay. Anyway, he drew this circle, and then he drew a line at the top. And he pointed to the line at the top, and he said, "You think that all of your thinking and your actions and how you live is all from up there." And then he drew another arrow down to the bottom, and he said, "The truth of the matter is, it all comes from down there." And he looked at me and he said, "And you know nothing about it." What step 4 does for us is it allows us to take a look at what drives us. How we think, why we feel the way we do, why we do the things that we do. Gives me an opportunity to see that. It invites me really to take a look at I guess for the best way to put it is, it gives me a chance to take a look at the world that I brought with me after taking those first 3 steps. So if I want to go from insane to sane, if I want to go from frustrated to peaceful, if I want to go from a sense of all heck is breaking loose to all is well, I need to look at the source of what's causing me my distress. And that's step 4. You're going to need a sponsor for it. I could not have done it without Palmer Graves, I'll tell you that right now. As you begin step 4, your sponsor will give you a list of what are the common ways that we think and act in the throes of codependency and addiction, that stuff we bring from the world. How many of y'all realize we are in an utterly codependent and addictive society and world? That's where we are. The really sad part about that for me is that is a downward spiral. It never ends well. So we're given this list. What it ends up being, what they end up being is a list of my defects of character. And it makes it easier for me to find them in my life. Now, don't freak out on me on the idea of defects of character, because I got them and you got them, we all got them. And that's why we need step 4. The reality is everybody needs step 4. Now, my sponsor described the process. He kind of wanted to disarm it a little bit for me, I think. And he said it's a little bit like taking an inventory at a grocery store. You're looking for dented cans and things that are out of date. Now, it's kind of interesting, when I started thinking about this, I was afraid that all of my cans were going to be dented, all my stuff was going to be out of date, and they were going to close the store down. Fortunately, as he told me, is you got some good stuff, you want to keep that. You're looking for the dented cans, you're looking for the stuff that's out of date. That's the stuff you want to have removed. That's what you're looking for in step 4. Now notice it says a fearless moral inventory. Doesn't mean that I don't have any fear doing this step. I had some fear doing this step because it's kind of interesting. I was afraid that they were going to discover I was crazy. But you know what? Crazy people never think that way. Crazy people never ask, am I crazy? No, they don't. So anyway, fearless doesn't mean that I don't have fear doing it. It means that fearful or not, I do the inventory because I got to know. If I want to be set free, I have to know what's holding me down and holding me back. I got to know. Okay, so this is the first question I want you all to consider. Get with a couple folks that are kind of close to you, and we'll consider this. This is going to be kind of a tough one because in the throes of addiction and codependency, it's hard to kind of see our way out of the bag. But here's the question for you. Imagine the difference it would make if you could know what is holding you down and holding you back and be set free from it. What kind of difference would that make in your life? What would it look like? What would it feel like? Now here are some, I want to give you some basic instructions before we start sharing. These are kind of basic instructions that we use in small groups when we meet together. Answer the question at hand. Please do not offer advice to anyone in your group. Please do not try and counsel someone. Please do not try and fix someone. And why is that? What now? Well, we're all broken, but here's how the program works. I can only fix myself. What was that now? What I missed it.
Just said nuh-uh.
Yeah. Oh, you already know too much about me. So anyway, that's the whole idea. So that's the question. That's the question I want you to consider. So kind of huddle up a little bit. Just kind of take a couple minutes and share as you imagine the difference it would make if you could know what's holding you down and holding you back and could be set free from it. Imagine what that would like. What would that look like? What would it feel like? So that good is really the only word. It's okay. You guys got a little bit of an idea how that's working? Come up with what? Anybody want to share what they can imagine that it would look like and feel like? Heaven. Yeah. I was kind of thinking to myself, all my complaining would disappear. All my resentments would be gone. The committee would stop speaking. How many of y'all have a committee? Yeah, if you got to, the committee would stop speaking. And I could begin, as someone said, I could begin to live at peace. And I was thinking about, Paul in Ephesians 3:20 says, with God's power working in us, God can do much more than anything we can ask or imagine. And that is true of 12 steps, let me tell you. All right, ready to go on? Questions on 4? Oh, what they were imagining? Good imaginations, I love that. All right. Step 5, read it with me. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. You're probably thinking to yourself, what? It's kind of funny when I first started the steps, I started looking ahead. How many of y'all think about looking ahead so you can kind of see what's coming next? Boy, when I came to this one, I got scared to death. You're probably thinking that this seems like a crazy idea. And at first, I really did too. You can even turn to the person next to you and say, you are not crazy for coming to this place. Now let me share with you why this step is necessary. Once I make my inventory, once I become aware of my defects of character, once I'm aware of what's holding me down and holding me back, step 5 invites me to own them, to claim them, to acknowledge them. Because up to this point, they're there, but I've just become aware that they're there, and I haven't really owned them yet. Notice it says the exact nature of our wrongs. This moves me from one. Have you ever had one of those "forgive me for my sins" prayers? Yeah, I have. Forgive me for my sins really doesn't get us much of anywhere. First of all, because I'm supposed to be asking for forgiveness for something I know I've done. And if I don't know I've done it, then there's not much going on there. And inherent in confessing my sins is my desire not to do it again. And if I don't know what it is I'm confessing, I got little chance of that. Now, the biblical basis for step 4 and 5 is found in 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. And here's the questions I struggled with as I prepared to take this step. Why do I have to admit my wrongs to God? Doesn't he already know? A good question. And the truth of the matter is, yes, he does know. He knows about my defects of character. But God wants me to know that he knows. So I'm invited to confess them. Once I confess them to him, then I know for sure that God knows, and God knows that I know he knows. You following me? Everybody knows. Okay, what about admitting and confessing them to ourselves? Now that one seems silly. Do I not know? Well, kind of yes and no. This is about ownership. This is about the exact nature of my wrongs. Once again, reminds me that this is not one of those "forgive me for my sins" prayers. I'm coming knowing the exact nature of my wrongs. I've done the work of step 4. I've seen the list. I know what's moving in my life and what's driving me. And this is the opportunity to own the exact nature of that. This will come in real handy later on when I want to ask God to remove them. Because if I don't know what I'm removing, little chance of that happening. So far, so good? Okay? Now, what about confessing them to another human being? We're kidding, right? I kind of thought that. Here's the best way. Have you ever tried to put toothpaste back in a tube after you've squeezed it? What kind of luck you have? Once it's out, it's out. It is a great reminder that once something is said, it is said. I cannot take it back. I cannot unsay it. I cannot deny it. The truth is made known. And I will tell you, this was one, and it was surprising to me. This is one of the most freeing parts of the step that I ever imagined. It's why the Bible instructs us to do it. James 5:1. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. And there's another reason. Confessing is one of the ways that to one another is one of the ways we experience grace. You know, when God wanted to allow us to experience his love and his grace, he doesn't just send a book. What's he send? A person through whom we can experience love and grace. It's relational. Put flesh on it. I did this with my sponsor, and he had done the very same thing with his sponsor. In my experience, my confession, that there was no judgment on the sponsor's part. He just simply listened, offered me grace, offered me confidential acceptance, because he had been where I was. Some people use their pastor for this. Some people will use another person that's in the steps. You want to find someone you can be safe with, who understands what you're doing. And as I said, one of the most freeing, if someone would have said to me that this was going to be incredibly freeing once you do it, I would have told them they were crazy, but it's the truth. This is the beginning of our journey towards freedom, this step here. And if the Son sets you free, you were free indeed. Next comes step 6. As I said, I'm glad these things are numbered. Read this one with me. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Well, when I came to step 6, I thought this will be easy. Who does not want to get rid of their defects of character? That's right. The old joke. Well, you're a little ahead, because step 7 kind of gets us there. We'll look at it. It's like, who wouldn't want that? To get rid of their defects of character. Turns out it was not nearly as simple as I thought. Turns out that these defects of character of mine, they have been with me for a long time. Man, when I got into 12-step work, I was 50 years old. I had 50 years of defects of character. I knew them well. They had allowed me to survive the world and my family. That's really what defects of character do for us. They are our survival tactics. They allow us to survive. You can congratulate yourself. You're sitting here and you have survived an addictive, codependent environment, and not everybody does. And I thought to myself, they may be defects of character, but by golly, they are my defects of character, and they have served me well. They're all I know. But they've also been the source of my stress and my strain and my worry. And so once I become aware of that, they've got to go. Step 6 is really about being sick and tired of being sick and tired. Step 6 is about being sick and tired of being sick and tired. Are you there? A lot of us are. When we come to the place when we are sick and tired of being sick and tired, when all the stress and the strain and the worry and the resentments and the anger and the obsessing catches up with us, and we're sick and tired of it, we are ready for step 6. Here's another time for sharing. Here's the question. What are you sick and tired of? What in your life are you just simply tolerating? Now, this is kind of a trick question, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up before you start. When most of us think about something that we're sick and tired of, a lot of times we will think about that person in our lives that we're sick and tired of. Left unchecked, it's kind of interesting, left unchecked in an unrecovered kind of life, we will seek a relational or geographical solution for what is fundamentally a spiritual problem. Do I need to say that one again? Yeah. We will seek a relational or geographical solution for what is fundamentally a spiritual problem. It is why people go from marriage to marriage, from church to church, from town to town, from job to job. And the interesting thing is, when I go from church to church, from marriage to marriage, from job, wherever I go, there I will be. Which means when I arrive, the whole thing starts over again, because the geographical or relational solution was not the solution. You with me? You got to go deeper on this one. It's not going to be a person, place, or a thing you're looking for. Now, why do I say that? Can't it be a person, place, or a thing? Because in the program, I have no control over persons, places, or things. So if that starts to come to mind for this question, you might as well just get rid of that and go on to something else. The answer here is found deeper than that. So spend a little bit of time with folks next to you to kind of share a little bit of what you're thinking on that. What are you sick and tired of? What are you sick and tired of being sick and tired of? What are you just tolerating in life? Give you a minute or two, unless you got a longer list. Okay, y'all ready to come back?
Give us 1 more minute.
1 more minute. Long list. Okay, y'all ready to come back? Ah, well, let's take a moment, and if you got one you want to throw up here. You what now? You can't, you,
When I thought I had my answer, it took me all the way back to number one. I failed, so I had to go all the way back to
well, actually, what's going to happen in the process of 12-step, I spent a lot of time going back to 1 and 2 and 3. You know, it's kind of like this is a journey, but you're never, you know, just as codependency and addiction is kind of a spiral downward, recovery is a spiral upward. And I get a chance to practice, we'll talk about on 7, I get a chance to practice over and over and over again. And it also often takes me back to step 1. I'll find out that I'm having some kind of difficulty, and I'll realize that my life has become unmanageable, and I have to ask the question, okay, what's the cause of that? And then I have to repeat step 1, 2, and 3. You know, yeah, it's you don't. In my experience, I didn't go through 1 through 12 and like I was done. I had to go back because it's a spiritual process, and I don't get it all the first time around, but you can get a lot of it. That's the best part. Okay, when I finally made a list of my defects of character, when I have confessed them, when I finally become ready to let them go, even though I have had them for a long time, and it's time for me to take 7, step 7. So let's read it together. We humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. I am ready to take this step when I finally come to realize that having tried everything else, if my defects of character are going to be removed, God's going to be the one who has to remove them. It's kind of interesting. How many of you all know the terminology for the big book? Yeah, big book is the AA book. Boy, Palmer, my sponsor, he had me spend a lot of time reading the big book because there's a tremendous amount of wisdom in it. And one of the things the big book says is, self cannot remove self from self. Self cannot remove self from self. So I have to humbly ask for that to be removed. I humbly come because I realize I cannot do it myself. Humbly means that I don't even have to understand how God's going to do it. All I need to do is just simply recognize that I cannot and ask Him humbly to do it for me. I want to talk a little bit about how it happens so you won't be surprised. At first glance, it looks relatively simple. That's what these steps kind of caught me by surprise, because every time I looked at one, I went, oh, humbly ask Him to remove them. That should be pretty easy. You know, you simply ask God to remove your defects of character. He waves the magic wand. Presto, changeo. I'm done. No. Not exactly. By now, I know what chains are holding me down, holding me back. Up to this point, they have helped me survive. They're in a lot of ways the only thing I know. You know, it's kind of interesting. Somebody said to me that recovery is about it's when in the throes of codependency and addiction. It's a little bit like trying to find your way through Atlanta with a map of Miami. You with me? Can you imagine how that would work? So this will give you an opportunity to imagine again. You know, how's a map of Miami going to work for finding my way through Atlanta? It won't matter how smart I am. It won't matter how persistent I am. It won't matter how hard I try. And incidentally, who are the people who have the most difficult time with these steps? It's the smart, stubborn ones. Because by golly, we're not willing to give up the old life. Kind of a funny thing. It took me 50 years, so you know what, and it wasn't because of the smart part, but boy, I was stubborn. I know that part. So recovery is like getting a new map. It's like I'm using a map of Miami, and it's no longer working for me. And recovery is getting a new map. A map of Atlanta for Atlanta. So up to this point, I've been using the old map. It's helped me survive, but it's not working for me anymore. And it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about one of the what I wanted to talk about with regard to removal. I survived an environment where my feelings were not welcome. It's kind of, so I learned to stuff them. Anybody done that? It's kind of interesting. Most of us in this room, my guess would be that feelings were not probably welcome. We learned how to stuff them, and we got disconnected from them, a lot of us. So we really don't have much of an idea how we feel or what we're feeling until we begin to recover that. In my environment, I learned to stuff them. That helped me survive. No one wanted to know how I felt, and especially no one wanted to know if I was angry. So I learned to stuff that one. I learned how to live numb. Now, it's kind of interesting. In the process, I got kind of out of touch with my feelings, which is one of the defects of character. But what happens when you stuff anger? It comes out sooner or later, doesn't it? And how does it come out? Pretty ugly, often rage. I wasn't going to say this, but I think I will. Just my wife married a long-haired biker with a bad attitude. Now she says, when I said that to someone, she said, "Oh no," she said, "you had gotten better by the time we got married." But I still had a bad attitude, and I had a mat on. There's no question about it. And I had learned to stuff that stuff down, and man, at times it came out, and it didn't come out as anger, it came out in rage. Now as I said, the recovery, addiction and codependency is a spiral downward. Recovery is a spiral upward, which means that I get a chance to practice this over and over until I get it right. In the program, they talk about practice, not perfection. So I'm going to make a trip back to step 1 and 2 and 3. I'm going to make a step back to 4 until I begin to start to get it right. When I begin the removal process, what I'm asking God to do, I'm asking to allow Him to move and work me towards my freedom. But freedom comes with a price. There's the price that Jesus paid on the cross for our freedom, because if the Son sets you free, you're free indeed. But there's a second price, and that's the price I need to pay if I want the freedom that comes from the removal of my defects of character. I have to be willing to die to them, to let them go. Boy, Romans 6:6 puts it this way: "For we know that our old self was crucified with Him, so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin." Well, you can insert defects of character in there, because we're talking about the same thing. It's kind of interesting. I have learned as I've read the scriptures that anytime something that I need to do is associated with the cross, there's going to be some pain involved for me. You with me? So let's look, kind of quickly at the spiritual process. The interesting thing is, step 7 takes us back, interestingly enough, to step 1, 2, and 3. I can't, God can, I think I'll let Him. Step 7 is, I think I'll let him. But this is not just about removal, this is about replacement. Step 7, there's a song, I'm trading my, let's see, gosh, I'm not going to sing it, don't worry about that. But there's a, Cindy, you know that I'm trading my, I'm trading my sorrows for,
I'm trading my sorrows, I'm trading my pain, I'm trading my sickness for the joy of the Lord.
yes, step 7 is a trade. It's a trade. It's not just about removal, about replacement. I'm going to be trading up. Kind of like they had this old car, get a brand new one. I trade for what will offer me peace and a joyful life. It's about trading my insanity for peace. It's about trading my chains for freedom. Now, why is replacement necessary in this? You know, why can't I just have my defects of character removed? Say what now? You have a hole there. Yeah, and and I didn't plan to bring this up, but Jesus has a great story about an empty house and what happens when you clean your house and leave it empty. The spiritual journey towards wholeness is not about the thou shalt nots. I'm never going to experience spiritual freedom if all I do is try not to do something. How many of you have tried, well, I am not going to be rageful anymore. I'm not going to be rageful anymore. I've made the decision today. It was kind of funny, my mentor used to say to me, you know, when I came up with something like that, he'd say, well, how's that working out for you? Which was a rhetorical question because he knew the reality was not very well. So how does the spiritual process of removal work? To begin with, when it comes to my defects of character, I need to understand what they are and how they're showing up in my life. That's what I'm doing in step 4. I get a chance to look at the egg and what's going on down below, what's driving my life. Now, I want to talk a little bit about rage because rage was a big one for me, and it's an easy one to see. The first thing I want to say is that anger is just simply a human emotion. Boy, we Christians get all kind of crazy on this thing, and we somehow think that we're not supposed to be angry. That we human beings, one of the emotions we have been given is anger. Along with being glad, along with being sad, along with being excited, along with being tender, all human emotions. But when I start stuffing that anger down and not dealing with it, anger out of control, anger that damages, anger that destroys, that's what? That's rage. And that's a defect of character. And when I'm humbly asking God to remove a defect of character, we're not looking for anger, we're looking for rage in this case. You with me? So what happens next? I humbly ask God to remove rage from my life. Funny thing happens. No sooner than I ask God to remove rage from my life, someone or something comes into my life to give me an opportunity to be rageful. Yep, you with me? Maybe I get a rude guy in traffic. Maybe I'm on a trip and I got a kid behind me in the airline seat that keeps kicking it. One of mine was when we were living in Miami, our bedroom was about 6 feet from our neighbor's fence, and he had a couple dogs that barked incessantly. Another opportunity to get rageful. So what do I need to do in this? First, I need to prayerfully begin to learn to become aware of when I'm becoming angry. Because remember, I'm out of touch with my feelings. I don't have much of an idea what's going on. That's why rage sometimes surprises me, because I'm unaware that I'm becoming angry. So the first thing I need to do is I need to begin to start to live aware. becoming aware of my feelings is the very first step in this. Second, I need to become aware of what's causing me to react in anger. Notice I did not say what's making me angry. Why did I not say what's making me angry? Because no one can make me angry. Anger is a choice I'm making. You with me? That kind of lays the groundwork for step 7 because it's about making better choices. So I have to begin to learn what's causing to react in anger, which is usually, quite frankly, for me, trying to control a person, place, or a thing. If I start to find myself angry now, I will start to look for a person, place, or a thing I'm trying to control that I have no control over. You with me? But the program has great tools if we use them. I'm reminded then that to try and control a person, place, or a thing is what? Fool's errand. Can't do it. And the interesting thing is it's usually rooted in fear. Most of our character defects are rooted in fear. Anger, that rage is rooted in fear. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be in control of something that I feel like I need to be in control of. So it's rooted in fear. So third, I can choose to react the way that I've always reacted, spiral down, or I can choose to respond in a different way, spiral up. In the program, I've learned that I got resources, and if I choose to use them, they will help. How many of you are familiar with the Serenity Prayer? Get familiar with it. Get familiar with it. Reinhold Niebuhr wrote it. You know, it's kind of interesting. The recovery groups use it, and they only use the first 4 lines. The prayer goes on. And what people don't realize is that Reinhold Niebuhr was a deeply Christian man. And the Serenity Prayer is a deeply Christian prayer. And I've learned that if I put the Serenity Prayer into practice, amazing things begin to happen. Because Reinhold Niebuhr knew how to live in a sinful, broken world as a follower of Jesus. It's a great resource. So the Serenity Prayer teaches me in the very beginning of it that with God's help, I can recognize and accept what I don't have control over. God, grant me this serenity. Can you all say it with me? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The reality of it is that I've got to have the wisdom to know the difference because I can't figure out one from the other. I got to have help. So once I begin to realize and accept the thing I cannot control or change in my life, what I am instructed to do is to simply turn that over to the care of God. Now I can wrangle it and try and force solutions and just be a real rear end in life trying to get that controlled. But the reality of it is I have no control over it. So I have a choice. I can turn it over to God, or I can try and handle it myself. How is handling it myself working for me? Not very well. That's how come I'm doing 12 steps. And the amazing thing is God can help me do this if I'm willing to die to the old way of thinking and doing. I will need a sponsor to help me do this. You really need a sponsor for all the steps. But in order to be able to kind of sort out how to do this, I got to have help from the outside to kind of watch what's going on. This is about learning to allow my rage to be removed and be replaced, as the Serenity Prayer says, be replaced with what? Peace. Serenity is simply peace. And the prayer teaches us that can happen for us if we use the resources. Now, in order to do this, and this is to me I think the tough part. This was kind of tough for me to admit, quite frankly, along with a lot of other things in this. But this kind of causes me to grapple with a basic question that I thought I had laid to rest a long time ago. Remember step 3? We made a decision to turn our lives and our will over to the care of God, who has the power to restore us to sanity. I thought I had done that when I took the first 3 steps and gave my life to Christ. The truth was, I simply gave my life to Him and took it back and tried to operate on my own power and my own will. Now, the root question behind that for me is God good? Is God trustworthy? Does God have my best interest in mind? Can I let Him have the problem I'm struggling with? And will He do the right thing? Let you in a little secret. Every one of the defects of character, where I try and take my life back and run it the way I want to run it, is all rooted in, is God trustworthy? Does He really love me? Will He do the right thing? Can I trust Him? Can I turn this over to Him and trust Him to handle it? You with me? Yeah. Gosh, I hated to admit that because I thought I was doing it. For me, it kind of came as a surprise. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect my untrustworthy behavior toward God to be the main driver in this. You with me? But that's the truth for me. So what 12-step has done is 12-step has allowed me to relearn and come to realize that God is indeed trustworthy with my life. And once I began to start to learn that, the defects of character simply disappear. It's kind of interesting. I have a God, so do you. I have a God who will allow me to climb up on His throne and run my life anytime I want. And early on, before 12-step, I did that a lot. And you know how it worked? Not very well. That's what gets us here. Questions? Did I throw anybody off? We good? Let's pray together. Oh God, we have tried living as though everything depends upon us. And the burden and the stress and the strain of that has become too much for us. Because down deep we know that we cannot handle it. And we want to learn that you can. Help us to come to know and experience that you really can do more than we can ask or think. That you really are trustworthy with our lives. That you really do love us as we are and long for the best for us. In the name of the one who sets us free and sets us free indeed, Jesus Christ. Amen.